Hey Playas, how you doing? Welcome back to Playas Guide. The last episode of Playas Guide I talked about Super Nintendo collecting. And this episode I'm going to continue on with that and elaborate and go into the details of the rarest of the rare and some of the underrated rare games, and then just generally appreciated games that hold a lot of value in general. So stick around and subscribe to the channel if you're a collector of retro games. Let's start off by diving in deep into the ultra rares. These are games you're probably never going to own, but they do exist and they're out there. Like Power Fest 1994. It looks as though there's only 2 copies of this game in existence, and this doesn't look like your average Super Nintendo game. So if you want this one, you're going to have to pay some crazy amount of money, and you're going to have to be extremely fortunate for it just to even come up for sale. Now there's another game that only 2 copies exist for as well, and that's the Nintendo Campus Challenge 1992. So it seems what Nintendo was trying to do here was sort of recreate the Nintendo World Championships, but I guess on a smaller and less successful scale. And that's why these games are so rare. Nintendo also ran in the early 90s some local contests that were held at Blockbuster, such as the Donkey Kong competition. Now there was a physical cartridge produced for this. I don't know if every Blockbuster got a copy of this to hold the competition. If you have info about that, please share it in the comments below. But otherwise, yeah, those are very rare cartridges. Nowhere near as rare as the Campus Challenge and the Power Fest, but still very rare. And then there's the Star Fox Super Weekend, which was a similar competition. These cartridges were later sold through Nintendo Power, so they were, I suppose you could consider them retail. Some people do, some people don't, but they were available for purchase through Nintendo Power at one time, and this cartridge seems to be a little bit more common than the Donkey Kong competition. One cartridge, or actually I believe there's 2 different ones, but the main one is called Max. And this, what I'm talking about, is a military training simulator for the Super Nintendo. And this is far more rare than the competition cartridges, but not quite as rare as the Power Fest and Campus Challenge. So if you see this one, consider yourself extremely fortunate. It doesn't have a very nice label or anything. It's just kind of a printed label with some basic writing there thrown on it. There's also a rifle, which is very realistic looking. If you're like me in Canada, you're probably not ever going to be able to own this thing because I don't know how you would get it across the border through customs. Another extremely rare game is the Exertainment Mountain Bike Rally / Speed Racer cartridge. I don't know if you were able to buy this cartridge separately, but I do know that the majority of these cartridges discovered, people found them inside an exercise bicycle that housed a Super Nintendo, and this cartridge would run on that Super Nintendo, and it would, I guess, attempt to simulate some sort of exercise through the game. The super rares. These are rare games. Some of them have a bit of a backstory, but I'm just going to list them off from the rarest to the lesser rares. But these are all very rare. These are the rarest of the rare in most people's Super Nintendo collections. So first off, Aero Fighters. Miko River, I believe, only released 2 games on the Super Nintendo. This was one of them, and it didn't sell very well at all. I'm not sure if it was exclusive to anything. I don't think so. I just think it had a very small print run and didn't sell well. Next one is Hagani. Now, Hagani was distributed through Blockbuster as a rental, and so most Blockbusters, you could assume, maybe had one or two of these cartridges, because in the 90s it was a thing that Nintendo had done with Blockbuster. Sega did the same with a few carts to draw you in and rent their games because they would have exclusives. Super Copa is another super rare Super Nintendo game. Final Fight Guy, I believe this was also a Blockbuster exclusive, and this is one that I really don't see often. I think I've only ever seen it in the wild once in all my time collecting. Metal Warriors. This is another super rare game. I think it goes along the lines of Aero Fighters, where it had one of the smallest print runs and didn't sell very well. I guess just didn't get much attention. You have Wild Guns, Pocky and Rocky 2, and Super Turrican 2. These are all up there in rarity. The Super Nintendo has some other very uncommon or rare games. It's debatable, but they get a lot of attention and have a high value because a lot of people like these games. Games like Earthbound and EVO and Mega Man X3, Harvest Moon, Castlevania, Dracula X, the Ninja Gaiden trilogy, Demon's Crest, and to some extent Space Mega Force. Not quite as well known as those games, but still kind of getting up there in value and popularity. Okay, so I have compiled a list of some of the more uncommon or like secret rare games that are pretty difficult to come by. You won't see these too often. You're more likely to see an X3 or an Earthbound than any of these games. But if you do, they have gone up a little bit in value over the past few years because more and more people have got into retro game collecting. And when they go for a complete set, they realize that, you know, these games aren't out there in an abundance. So Hurricanes, it's a soccer game, and it's okay actually. I've played it, and it's really rare. It's gone up now a bit in value. I mean, not too long ago, a few years back, it was like a $10-15 game. Now it's closer to the $100 range. Incantation, R-Type 3, Zero, the Kamikaze Squirrel, Bronchi, the Brontosaurus. I have no idea what that one's about. I've always wanted to pick it up. It kind of looks interesting. Sonic Blastman 2, Rex Ronin, Experimental Surgeon, Artie Lightfoot, Casper, Ogre Battle, Captain Commando, Nosferatu, Oscar, SWAT Cats, Mr. Nut, Imperium, which is a really cool looking shooter. Wish I had picked it up earlier, but now it's gone up in value. Not sure if I'm going to get that one. One day. Lost Vikings 2, Brandish, Biometal, Stone Protectors, Realm, Brainies, and Chavez Boxing. And then even a little bit more rare than Chavez Boxing is Chavez Boxing 2. So there you have it. I've covered most, if not all, of the rare games on the Super Nintendo. If you know of some other hidden or secret rare games that are good to talk about them in the comments below, please. I'd like to hear some discussion on what you've seen out there and what you're not seeing out there. That's it for this episode of Playas Guide. Later, players.